Did you ever wonder what people really meant when they whispered about sadness and tragedies? Not the kind of sadness you get from a lost puppy, but the kind that clings to legends, that echoes through centuries in the rustle of parchment and the murmur of forgotten tongues. Let's be honest, most historical accounts just tell you what happened, but what about how they felt? What about the secret language they used to describe desires that weren't, well, sanctioned? Imagine a world where a name wasn't just a name. In the 12th century, a young man named Tristan, a name that sounded heroic, noble, full of promise, carried a weight of sorrow so profound it stained every verse of his story. It wasn't about a lost love, not entirely. It was about a longing, a yearning that pulsed beneath the surface of every carefully crafted sentence. Tristan, the scribes noted, was a reference to triste, the French word for sad. A simple word, yes, but in the hands of these medieval storytellers, it became a key, unlocking a hidden chamber of emotion. Think about it. A name, a label, a simple categorization, these were the building blocks of their world. And they weren't just using them to describe knights and castles. They were using them to describe, well, let's just say inclinations that weren't always celebrated. Let's travel back to Spain to the 14th century and meet Don Juan Manuel. He was a courtier, a diplomat, a storyteller, but he was also a master of misdirection. He created a character called Patronio, a figure who advised the count, offered wise counsel, and essentially gave the count instructions. Sounds straightforward, right? Wrong. Patronio was, in essence, a servant, but his name, Patronio, was a deliberate trick. It was meant to evoke the idea of patron, the master, the one in charge. Instead, he was a servant, a shadow, a subtle challenge to the established order. It's a tiny, brilliant maneuver, a wink to the audience, a hint that perhaps the common folk held more power than they were given credit for. Now let's talk about names that held a secret, a subtle suggestion. Consider Don Melon, a character in Juan Ruiz's Libro debut in Amor. This man was obsessed, consumed by a desire for a woman named Dona Andrina. Her name, Lady Mirabelle, was a beautiful, delicate thing, a small, plump berry, a sloe, but Ruiz wasn't interested in mere beauty. He was interested in the shape of that berry, its fullness, its potential for bursting with juice. The image he conjured, a hard, swollen fruit pressing against a juicy red one, was shockingly direct, a coded allusion to a very specific kind of longing. And then there's Don Hurón, Sir Ferret. This character wasn't just a nobleman, he was a predator. A ferret, you see, is a cunning, stealthy hunter, known for its long body and its habit of burrowing into the hiding places of rabbits. The name itself was a metaphor, a carefully crafted symbol of a particular kind of desire, a desire that was both subtle and insistent. But the real treasures lie hidden in the footnotes, in the overlooked details. Take, for example, the Libro de los Ejemplos del Conde Lucaner et de Patronio. This collection of tales is filled with seemingly innocent observations, a description of a bird's song, the way sunlight filters through a forest, but beneath the surface there's a current of something else. A current of unspoken desires, of suppressed longings, and what about the language itself? The way they describe bodies, relationships, experiences. The medieval world wasn't shy about using metaphors. They used the language of plants, of animals, of the natural world to describe the most intimate of human experiences. A swollen bulb, a plump berry, a cunning hunter, these weren't just images, they were codes, keys to unlocking a hidden vocabulary of desire. Let's venture further to the 14th century and Boccaccio's Decameron. This collection of stories is notoriously explicit, a celebration of pleasure and transgression. But even within its brazenness, there are subtle hints, coded references that speak to a world where same-sex desire was not openly acknowledged, but nonetheless existed. Consider Frate Cipala, a wandering friar who appears in several tales. His name, Brother Onion, is a clever pun. The word for onion, Cipala, has a small protuberance, a subtle bulge. It's a playful allusion to male anatomy, a wink to the audience, a reminder that even in the midst of pious pronouncements, there's a current of desire running beneath the surface. And then there's Calandrino, a character who finds himself in a bizarre and unsettling situation, believing he's pregnant after a particularly unconventional encounter with his wife. The details of this tale are deliberately ambiguous, but the implication is clear. Calandrino's experience challenges conventional notions of gender and sexuality. But the most fascinating discoveries often lie in the margins, in the glosses and annotations left by medieval readers. Scholars have spent years deciphering these marginalia, piecing together clues about the hidden meanings of these texts. They've discovered that some readers were actively seeking out these coded references, using them as a secret language to communicate with one another. And then there are the Cantigas d'Escarnjo e de Mal Dizer, the Songs of Scorn and Bad Speech, a collection of poems from Galicia and Portugal. These poems are filled with crude, often shocking, language, and they offer a rare glimpse into the world of medieval homosexuality. The term fadamalho, to fuck, is used repeatedly, often in reference to men who were engaging in same-sex activity. The word itself is a badge of shame, a whispered secret, but it's also a declaration of identity. The poets of Sodom, as Josiah Blackmore called them, weren't necessarily engaging in acts of transgression. They were simply acknowledging a reality that was often hidden, suppressed, or denied. They were using language to name a desire that couldn't be easily articulated, and it's not just about names. It's about the way they described bodies, the way they portrayed relationships, the way they created characters who defied conventional norms. The hermaphrodite, the androgynous figure, the character who challenges the established order, these were all symbols of a world where boundaries were blurred, where desire was fluid, and where the rules were constantly being questioned. Consider the myth of Ganymede, the beautiful boy abducted by Zeus. In medieval literature, Ganymede often represented a kind of idealized male beauty, a symbol of desire and longing. But he also represented a transgression, a challenge to the established order. He was a boy, a lover, a divine being, a figure who embodied the forbidden. And then there's Hermaphroditus, the god of hermaphrodites, a figure who embodies both male and female characteristics. In medieval literature, Hermaphroditus was often associated with homosexuality, a symbol of a desire that defied categorization. These figures weren't simply mythological characters, they were symbols of a complex and often contradictory world. A world where desire was both celebrated and condemned, where transgression was both feared and desired. So, what do we learn from all of this? That the medieval world wasn't as repressed as we might assume. That there were people who were exploring their desires, challenging the established order, and finding ways to express themselves in secret, perhaps. Or perhaps we're simply beginning to understand the nuances of a language that was deliberately obscured. The names, the metaphors, the subtle allusions, these were all part of a complex system of communication, a way of talking about desire without explicitly naming it. It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles and kings and queens. It's about people, about their desires, their longings, their secrets. And sometimes the most revealing stories are the ones that are hidden in the margins, in the footnotes, in the whispers of forgotten tongues. But isn't it a bit unsettling to realize that these people, these writers, these readers were grappling with ideas that are still relevant today? That they were struggling to understand their own desires, to find ways to express themselves in a world that often denied them the freedom to do so. And finally, a question for you: if you could step back in time and spend a day in a medieval library, what would you be searching for? What secrets would you be trying to uncover?